My stepmother slapped me hard enough to spark lights in my vision right in the middle of our crowded backyard. I was 27, yet she forced me to kneel and apologize like a servant as I burned with humiliation. Grandpa slid a cold key into my palm, whispering a command to go there tomorrow. I wiped the blood from my lip, unaware that small piece of metal would soon destroy everything she thought she owned. My name is Violet Henry, and on the day my life shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, I was wearing a dress I had bought specifically to look invisible. It was a muted navy blue, professional enough for a funeral, but festive enough for a birthday, purchased with my own salary from Northline Data Strategies. I was 27 years old, a data analyst with a corner office and a mortgage I paid myself, but standing in the manicured backyard of my childhood home in Pinebrook, Oregon, I felt like a trespasser. The occasion was my grandfather Walter Henry's 80th birthday. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, charcoal smoke from the grill, and the kind of forced politeness that only wealthy suburban families can sustain for more than 2 hours. Vanessa, my stepmother, had orchestrated the entire event with the precision of a military general conducting a siege. The theme was timeless elegance, which apparently meant white linens, crystal glassware outdoors, and me running around like a glorified servant while the hired catering staff stood by the bar looking bored. Violet, honestly, look at the ice bucket on table 4. Vanessa's voice cut through the low hum of conversation. She did not shout. Vanessa never shouted unless she wanted an audience. Instead, she used a tone that was sickly sweet, like honey laced with arsenic. It is practically water. Grandpa Walter cannot drink lukewarm tea. Be a dear and refill it? She was standing near the patio doors, holding a flute of champagne, wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost more than my first car. She looked radiant, the picture of the devoted daughter-in-law, smiling at Mrs. Gable, the wife of the local judge. I gritted my teeth, my fingers tightening around the strap of my purse. Vanessa, the caterers are right there. I can just wave one of them over. Vanessa's smile did not waver, but her eyes hardened into 2 chips of flint. They are busy with the hors d'oeuvres. Violet, do not make a scene. It is your grandfather's big day. Just help out a little. Is that so hard? It was not hard. That was the trap. It was never hard to get ice, or fetch a napkin, or move a chair. But it was the accumulation of these small, sharp commands that eroded you. It was the way she made sure that every time a guest looked at me, I was holding a dirty plate or a trash bag, reinforcing the narrative she had spun for years, that Violet Henry was not really part of the family, just someone who lingered on the periphery, useful only when serving. I walked to the bar, feeling the eyes of my cousins on my back. They were sitting in the shade, laughing at something on a phone screen. They did not have to get ice. They were guests. I was family, which in Vanessa's dictionary meant unpaid labor. I filled the bucket, the cold cubes numbing my fingers, and carried it back to table 4 where Grandpa Walter sat. He was in his wheelchair, looking smaller than I remembered. A stroke 2 years ago had taken much of his mobility and some of his speech, leaving him frail and often silent. He was staring at the hydrangeas with a distant look in his cloudy blue eyes. When I set the ice bucket down, his hand twitched on the armrest. He looked up at me, and for a second, the fog cleared. He offered me a weak, trembling smile. "Hi, Grandpa," I whispered, touching his shoulder. "Happy birthday." He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could get a word out, a shadow fell over us. Vanessa had drifted over, bringing her circle of admirers with her. "Here she is," Vanessa cooed, placing a hand on my back, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a shove. "Always so helpful. Our Violet. I do not know what I would do without her running these little errands. It keeps her humble, right?" Mrs. Gable chuckled politely. "She is a good girl. Vanessa, you have done a wonderful job with her since you took over." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Took over. As if I were a failing business she had acquired in a hostile takeover. I stood up straight. preparing to excuse myself, to walk away, maybe even to leave. I had endured 2 hours of this. That was enough. But then disaster struck. It happened in slow motion. A young waiter was weaving through the crowd with a tray of empty glasses. At the same time, Mrs. Gable turned sharply to greet someone behind her, her elbow knocking into the waiter. The tray tipped. The waiter lunged to catch it. In the chaos, Mrs. Gable stumbled backward, losing her balance. She did not fall, but her hand flailed out, holding a glass of heavy Cabernet Sauvignon. The red wine launched from her glass in a perfect arc. It did not hit the ground. It splashed entirely across the front of Vanessa's cream silk dress. The silence that followed was absolute. The jazz music playing softly from the speakers seemed to stop. The chatter died instantly. All that remained was the dark, bleeding stains spreading across Vanessa's chest and stomach, ruining the perfection she had spent months curating. Mrs. Gable gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Vanessa, I am so sorry. I tripped." Vanessa stood frozen, her face draining of color. She looked down at the ruined fabric, then up at Mrs. Gable. She could not scream at the judge's wife. That would be social suicide in Pinebrook. She needed a scapegoat. She needed a target that could not fight back. Her head snapped toward me. I was standing 3 feet away, holding the empty ice scoop. I had not touched anyone. I had not moved. But I saw the calculation in her eyes, the instant rewriting of history. "You pushed her," Vanessa whispered. "What?" I blinked, stunned. "No, I did not. I am standing right here." "You bumped into her." Vanessa's voice rose, cracking with a hysterical edge that I knew was manufactured. "I saw you, Violet. You were clumsy with that ice bucket, and you shoved Mrs. Gable right into me." "Vanessa, that is insane," I said, my voice shaking. "I am 3 feet away. Mrs. Gable slipped." "Do not lie to me," Vanessa shrieked. The facade of the elegant hostess shattered. She lunged forward, closing the distance between us. "You have been sulking all day because I asked you to help. You did this on purpose to ruin my dress, to ruin his birthday." "I did not touch her." I looked around the circle of faces, desperate for a witness. "Mrs. Gable, tell her I did not touch you." Mrs. Gable looked flustered, embarrassed by the drama. She looked at Vanessa's furious face, then at me. It was easier to let the stepdaughter take the fall than to admit she had been clumsy. She stayed silent, lowering her eyes. That silence was a knife in my gut. "See?" Vanessa hissed. She was right in my face now, smelling of expensive champagne and venom. "You are spiteful. You have always been jealous that I am the one taking care of this family while you play pretend with your little data job. Look at what you did." "I did not do anything," I yelled back, my control finally snapping. "Stop lying, Vanessa. Everyone saw it." And then she hit me. It was not a shove. It was a full, open-palmed slap across the face with every ounce of her strength behind it. The sound cracked through the yard like a gunshot. My head whipped to the side. The impact was so hard that my vision went white at the edges. A sharp, stinging heat exploded across my left cheek, radiating into my jaw. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the table to keep from falling into the grass. I stood there, gasping, my hand hovering over my cheek but not touching it. I could feel the skin pulsing. I was 27 years old. I was a grown woman, and she had just struck me in front of 25 of Pinebrook's elite. I slowly turned my head back to look at her. Vanessa was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her hand still raised slightly. There was no regret in her eyes, only triumph. She had asserted her dominance. She had put the dog back on the leash. But I did not look at her. I looked past her. I looked at my father. Mark Henry stood near the grill, a beer in his hand. He had seen everything. He had seen the wine fly. He had heard the accusation. He had seen his wife strike his daughter. Our eyes met. For a heartbreaking second, I thought he would step forward. I thought, finally, this would be the line. He would drop the beer. He would roar. He would tell her to get out. He would be the father I remembered from before she arrived. Instead, he looked down. He shifted his weight, looked at the grass, and took a long, slow sip of his beer. The betrayal hit me harder than the hand. My heart felt like it had been scooped out of my chest with a melon baller. He was not going to save me. He was never going to save me. The silence in the yard was heavy, suffocating. The guests were looking anywhere but at us. They were studying their manicures, their shoes, the sky. They knew this was wrong, but intervening would mean crossing Vanessa, and nobody in Pinebrook wanted to be on her bad side. Then, a rasping sound broke the stillness. "Eat," a voice croaked. It was Grandpa Walter. He had wheeled himself slightly forward, his hands gripping the rubber tires of his chair. His voice was weak, scratchy, but it carried a strange authority. He did not look at Vanessa. He did not look at me. He looked at the crowd. "Food gets cold," he got out, waving a trembling hand toward the buffet. "Eat." It was a command, but it was also a diffusal. He was giving them permission to look away, and God, they took it. The tension broke as people rushed to obey, turning back to their plates with frantic casualness, the conversation restarting in hushed, nervous murmurs. Vanessa smoothed her dress, the red stain still glaringly bright. She glared at me one last time. "Clean up this mess, Violet, and then get out of my sight." She turned on her heel and marched toward the house to change, her heels clicking on the patio stones. I stood there for a moment, fighting the tears that burned the backs of my eyes. I would not cry. I would not give her that satisfaction. My cheek was throbbing, a dull ache that synchronized with my heartbeat. I knelt down on the grass, not to apologize, but to pick up the shards of glass from the dropped flute. If I left them, someone would step on them. That was who I was. Even when they beat me, I worried about them getting cut. As I reached for a large, jagged piece of crystal near the wheel of Grandpa's chair, I felt a touch on my wrist. It was dry and papery. I looked up. Grandpa Walter was leaning down over the armrest of his wheelchair. He was close, closer than he had been in months. Vanessa usually kept him guarded, claiming he got overstimulated by too much family time. But right now, in the post-slap chaos, no one was watching the old man. His eyes were clear, shockingly clear. The fog I had seen earlier was gone, replaced by a sharp, urgent intensity that startled me. He reached for my hand. I thought he was going to comfort me, to pat my palm and tell me it would be okay. Instead, he pressed something hard and cold into the center of my hand. I looked down. Lying against my skin was a key. It was not a modern house key. It was a small silver key with a square head, the kind you use for a padlock or a secure box. Taped tightly around the shaft of the key was a thin strip of paper, rolled up tight like a scroll. I looked back at him, confusion warring with the pain in my face. "Grandpa?" He squeezed my fingers shut over the key, his grip surprisingly strong for a man who supposedly could barely hold a spoon. He leaned in further, until his face was inches from mine. I could smell his peppermint aftershave and the old tobacco scent that clung to his cardigan. "Tomorrow," he whispered. The word was not slurred. It was crisp, sharp. He glanced toward the house where Vanessa had disappeared, then back to me. His voice dropped so low it was barely a breath of wind. "Go to the place on the paper. Loft 3B, Riverfront Storage, Portland." I blinked, trying to process the address. Riverfront Storage? That was over an hour away. "What? Why?" "Shh," he hissed, his eyes darting to my father, who was still staring at the grill as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Do not tell your father, and absolutely, under no circumstances. Do you let her know?" He released my hand and slumped back into his chair, instantly transforming back into the frail, vacant stroke victim. He let his mouth hang open slightly, his eyes drifting back to the hydrangeas. "Grandpa?" I whispered again, my heart hammering against my ribs. He did not answer. He just tapped his finger once on the armrest, a silent signal. "Go." I stood up, the key burning a hole in my palm. I shoved it deep into the pocket of my navy dress. My hand was trembling. I looked around the yard one last time. My father was laughing at something a neighbor said. A hollow, fake sound. The guests were eating shrimp cocktails, deliberately ignoring the woman with the red mark on her face standing in the center of the lawn. I felt a sudden, cold clarity wash over me. This was not my family. Not anymore. I did not clean up the glass. I left the shards where they lay, glittering in the afternoon sun like diamonds. I turned and walked toward the side gate. I did not run. I walked with my head high, even though my insides were screaming. I passed the catering van, past the rows of luxury SUVs parked in the driveway, and got into my 6-year-old Honda Civic. As I keyed the ignition, I pulled the object out of my pocket. I unrolled the tiny strip of paper taped to the silver metal. Loft 3, Riverfront Storage, Portland. The handwriting was shaky, but the numbers were distinct. I touched my cheek. It was hot to the touch. The physical pain was fading, replaced by a cold, hard knot of curiosity and rage. Why did my grandfather, a man who had barely spoken a coherent sentence in a year, have a secret storage unit in Portland? And why was he terrified of Vanessa finding out? I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, leaving the timeless elegance party behind me. As I drove down the winding streets of Pinebrook, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I did not know what was in Loft 3B, but as the image of my father turning his back on me replayed in my mind on an endless loop, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to find out, and if my stepmother wanted a war, she had just handed me the ammunition. The drive away from my grandfather's 80th birthday party was a blur of asphalt and green suburban lawns that all looked the same. My cheek throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, a physical reminder of the humiliation that was still burning through my veins. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other wrapped tight around the small, cold key in my pocket. That piece of metal felt like an anchor, the only heavy, real thing in a world that had suddenly become unmoored. As the adrenaline from the confrontation began to fade, the memories I had suppressed for years started to claw their way to the surface. It was impossible not to look back. It was impossible not to trace the fracture lines that had led to this moment. The slap was not an accident. It was not a momentary lapse of judgment by a stressed hostess. It was the inevitable conclusion of a takeover that had begun 7 years ago, right after the worst day of my life. I was 20 years old when my mother died. Cancer had taken her with a speed that felt cruel, leaving a void in our house that echoed. My father, Mark Henry, was not built for grief. He was a man who needed order, who needed a schedule, and without my mother to orchestrate his life, he fell apart. He wandered the house like a ghost, unable to make decisions, unable to function. Then came Vanessa. She appeared exactly 1 year later, like she had been summoned by a casting director looking for the perfect second wife. She met my father at a charity gala, and within 3 months, she was sitting at our dinner table. Back then, Vanessa was not the monster who slapped me in front of the neighbors. She was soft. She was solicitous. She brought light back into the dusty hallways of our home. She listened to my father's repetitive stories with wide, attentive eyes. She even charmed Grandpa Walter, who was sharper back then, bringing him rare scotch and listening to his old business war stories. I wanted to like her. God, I tried so hard to like her. I was young, grieving, and desperate to see my father smile again. When they announced their engagement 6 months later, I hugged her. I actually thanked her for making him happy. I did not see the shark swimming beneath the surface of the water until the ring was on her finger and the marriage license was signed. The change was subtle at first, masked as improvements. It started with the furniture. My mother's favorite armchair was moved to the basement because it clashed with the new aesthetic. Then the paintings were replaced. Then the staff. The housekeeper who had been with us for 15 years was let go because Vanessa claimed she was stealing silverware. A lie so blatant it took my breath away. But my father, desperate to keep his new bride happy, nodded and signed the severance check. By the time I graduated college and started my career, the house I grew up in had become a museum dedicated to Vanessa's taste. and I had become an exhibit she did not know how to curate. I worked at Northline Data Strategies as a senior analyst. I spent my days building complex algorithms, managing massive data sets, and advising corporate clients on efficiency. I was good at my job. I was respected. I earned a salary that put me in the top bracket for my age group. But the moment I crossed the threshold of the Henry estate, all of that vanished. To Vanessa, I was not a professional woman. I was a rebellious teenager who refused to launch. Even though I paid a significant amount of rent to live in the guest cottage on the property, money Vanessa insisted was for upkeep, she treated me like a squatter. "Violet, did you leave your shoes in the hallway again?" she would say, her voice dripping with disappointment as I walked in the door after a 10-hour shift. "It looks so cluttered. Honestly, I do not know how you expect to run a household of your own one day when you cannot even manage a mudroom." "I just walked in, Vanessa," I would reply, fighting the urge to scream. "I have not even taken my coat off." "Excuses," she would sigh, turning back to her magazine. "Always excuses. You are 27, Violet. Stop acting like a freeloader." Freeloader. That was her favorite word. She used it when I ate dinner with them. She used it when I used the laundry machines. She used it despite the fact that I bought my own groceries, paid my own bills, and covered the property taxes on the guest cottage. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. She needed me to be the failure so she could be the savior who tolerated me. My father never defended me. That was the part that hurt the most. In the beginning, I would look to him for help, waiting for him to say, "Vanessa, she works hard. Leave her alone." But he would just bury his face in his newspaper or suddenly find something fascinating to examine on the ceiling. He had handed his spine over to her, along with the house keys. He was terrified of rocking the boat. So he let her throw me overboard again and again. The only person who saw the truth was Grandpa Walter. Grandpa had built the family fortune. He was a tough, uncompromising businessman in his prime, and even as age began to slow him down, he had a bullshit detector that was second to none. He never liked how Vanessa spoke to me. "She is a viper," he told me once, 2 years ago, before the stroke took his voice away. We were sitting on the porch, watching the rain. "She smiles with her teeth." "Dad loves her," I had said, trying to be the peacemaker. "Your dad is a fool," Grandpa had grunted. "He mistakes control for care." After Grandpa's stroke, Vanessa's control tightened into a stranglehold. She realized quickly that Walter was the only check on her power, the only one who could technically overrule her influence on my father. So, she began the process of isolation. She fired his longtime nurses and hired an agency that reported directly to her. She moved his bedroom to the ground floor for his safety, but it conveniently kept him away from the main living areas where he might overhear things. She restricted his visitors, claiming he was too frail for company. I had to fight just to see him for 20 minutes a day, and she would always hover in the doorway, monitoring us like a prison warden. "He needs his rest. Violet," she would say, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "Do not agitate him with your work stories. He gets confused." He did not get confused. I could see it in his eyes. He was trapped in a failing body, watching a predator dismantle his legacy, and he was powerless to stop it. Or so I thought. The real turning point, the moment I knew this was not just a difficult family dynamic but a calculated crime, happened 3 months ago. I had come home late from Northline. The house was dark, but a sliver of light was bleeding out from under the door of my father's study. I was walking past to get a glass of water when I heard Vanessa's voice. She was not speaking to my father. She was on the phone, and her tone was sharp, businesslike, completely devoid of the breathy sweetness she used in public. "I do not care what the initial assessment said," she was saying. "Mark is ready to sign the durable power of attorney for both himself and the old man. I have convinced him that Walter's cognitive decline is accelerating. We need to restructure the trust before the fiscal year ends." I froze in the hallway, my breath catching in my throat. Power of attorney, restructuring the trust. These were not casual terms. These were legal weapons. Yes, she continued, a low laugh escaping her lips. Violet? Oh, do not worry about her. She is soft. She thinks if she keeps her head down, I will let her keep the cottage. She has no idea she's already written out of the updated draft. Once Mark signs the new medical directives, I will handle the rest. I had backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I hid in my room that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling a cold dread settle in my stomach. She was not just being mean. She was planning a heist. She was going to steal everything my grandfather had built, everything my father owned, and she was going to leave me with nothing. I tried to warn my father the next day. I sat him down and told him what I heard. Dad, she is talking about power of attorney. She wants to control Grandpa's trust. You cannot sign anything. He had looked at me with tired, glazed eyes. Violet, you are being paranoid. Vanessa is just trying to protect our assets. Managing the estate is complicated. She is taking the burden off my shoulders. She is taking your rights. Dad, she is going to cut me out. That is enough, he had snapped, his face flushing red. I will not have you sowing discord because you are jealous of her. Vanessa loves this family. She is the only reason this house is still standing. That was the moment I realized I was truly alone. He was too far gone. The gaslighting had been too effective. He believed her narrative so completely that the truth looked like an attack. From that day on, I walked on eggshells. I watched as she slowly stripped Grandpa of his dignity, talking about him like he was a piece of furniture that needed to be put in storage. She started mentioning specialized care facilities in Arizona, places that were thousands of miles away from me. She was preparing to ship him off so she could liquidate the assets without a witness. The slap at the party was not just violence, it was a declaration of victory. It was Vanessa telling me, publicly, that she had won. She had the house. She had my father. She had the social standing. And I was just the help, the nuisance she could strike with impunity because she knew no one would stop her. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated the old man in the wheelchair. As I pulled my car into the driveway of my small cottage, the headlights cutting through the darkness, I pulled the key out of my pocket again. I ran my thumb over the ridges. Grandpa Walter had been playing a long game, too. While Vanessa was busy charming the country club set and manipulating my father, Grandpa had been watching. He had been planning. Do not let her know, he had whispered. He knew. He knew everything. I looked at the address on the tiny scroll of paper again. Loft 3B, Riverfront Storage, Portland. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of helplessness began to lift. Vanessa thought she was the only one with secrets. She thought she was the chess master moving pawns around the board, but she did not know that the king she thought was captured had just slipped a dagger to the queen's pawn. I was not just a data analyst, I was a Henry. And tomorrow, I was going to find out what exactly that meant. I was done being the victim. I was done being the punching bag. I walked into my dark cottage, but I did not turn on the lights. I did not want Vanessa to see that I was awake. I sat by the window, watching the main house where the lights were still blazing, where she was probably spinning a story to my father about how I had ruined the party, how unstable I was, how it was time to finally cut me loose. Let her talk, let her plan. Because tomorrow, I was going to Portland, and for the first time in a long time, the hunter was about to become the hunted. The key felt warm in my hand now, pulsing with a potential I did not yet understand. All I knew was that the game had changed, and I was ready to play. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 5:30, waging a war against my own face. The bruise Vanessa had left on my cheek had bloomed overnight, transforming from a tender red mark into a sickly shade of purple and yellow that looked like a storm cloud trapped under my skin. I applied a layer of color-correcting green primer, followed by a heavy foundation, and finally a dusting of setting powder. I looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together, but at least the violence was hidden. I slipped the silver key into the pocket of my blazer. It felt heavy, dragging down the fabric, a constant physical reminder of the secret I was carrying. I had slept with it under my pillow, terrified that Vanessa might come into my room in the middle of the night and find it. She had done that before, barging in to check for dust or borrow a hanger, but really just to remind me that I had no privacy. Driving to Northline Data Strategies felt different that day. Usually, the commute was my time to decompress, to transition from Violet the scapegoat to Violet the senior analyst. But today, the car felt too small. The road felt too long. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, I half expected to see Vanessa's black SUV tailing me, her eyes narrowed behind sunglasses, knowing exactly where I was going. When I walked into the office, I kept my head down, making a beeline for my cubicle. But Kara Mason was already there, leaning against my desk with a cup of coffee in each hand. Kara was my only real friend at Northline, a sharp-tongued marketing manager who could spot a lie from a mile away. "Morning, sunshine," she said, extending a cup toward me. "You are late, which is weird, because you are never late, and you are wearing enough foundation to cover a tattoo. What is going on?" I took the coffee, keeping the left side of my face turned slightly away from the fluorescent overhead lights. "Rough night," I muttered, booting up my computer. I bumped into a cabinet door in the kitchen. It was stupid. I just did not want to look like a prizefighter. Kara narrowed her eyes, scanning my face. She did not buy it. I knew she did not buy it. She knew about Vanessa. She knew about the chores I had to do. She had told me 100 times to move out, to cut them off, to run. "A cabinet door," she repeated, her voice flat. "That must be one aggressive cabinet. Violet, did it have a ring on its finger?" My stomach lurched. Kara was too smart. "Drop it, Kara, please. I just need to get through these reports." She held my gaze for a long moment, debating whether to push. Finally, she sighed and set her own coffee down. "Fine, but if that cabinet decides to hit you again, I am calling the police. I do not care who the cabinet is married to." She walked away, leaving me shaking. I pulled the key out of my pocket and set it next to my keyboard, hidden behind a stack of files. I needed to know what this was. I needed to know where Grandpa was sending me. I opened a private browser window and typed in the address. Loft 3B, Riverfront Storage, Portland. I expected to see a website for a self-storage facility. I expected images of roll-up metal doors, concrete corridors, and advertisements for first month free. Instead, the search results pulled up a sleek, minimalist website for a building called the Riverfront. It was not a storage facility, or at least, not anymore. It was a renovated historic warehouse in the Pearl District, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. The description boasted luxury industrial lofts, 24-hour concierge, and biometric security. I clicked on the Available Units tab. There were none. The last unit that had sold in the building went for over $2 million. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. $2 million. Grandpa Walter was wealthy. Yes, he had founded Henry Logistics 40 years ago, but Vanessa controlled the accounts now. She scrutinized every penny. If I spent $20 on takeout, she asked to see the receipt. How could Grandpa possibly have access to a multi-million-dollar loft in the heart of Portland without her knowing? And why was it listed as Riverfront Storage on the scrap of paper? Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he was confused. The stroke had affected his mind. Vanessa always said, maybe he was sending me to a place that existed 40 years ago, a place that was just a dusty memory. But I remembered the clarity in his eyes. Go there. The workday dragged on like a sentence. I stared at spreadsheets, but the numbers swam before my eyes. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, terrified it was Vanessa calling to scream at me, to tell me she knew I had the key, that the police were on their way to arrest me for theft. But the phone remained silent. At 5 o'clock sharp, I logged off. Usually, I stayed until 6 or 7, trying to delay the inevitable return to the Henry estate, but not today. Heading out? Kara asked, looking up from her desk as I threw my coat on. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just tired. I'm going to head home early." I lied. I did not turn toward Pinebrook. I merged onto the highway heading north, toward the Portland skyline. The drive took 45 minutes. The rain started halfway there. A classic Oregon drizzle that turned the world gray and slick. My windshield wipers slapped back and forth, counting down the miles. 3B, 3B, 3B. When I exited the highway and navigated into the Pearl District, the atmosphere changed. This was not the suburbs. This was old brick warehouses converted into art galleries, high-end coffee shops, and condos that cost more than my life's earnings. I found the building easily. It was a massive structure of red brick and black steel, looming over the street like a fortress. There was no sign that said storage, just a discreet brass plaque near the entrance that read, "The Riverfront." I parked my Honda 2 blocks away, afraid that the valet would laugh at my beat-up car. I walked through the rain, clutching my purse against my chest. Feeling the key burning through the leather, I felt like an imposter. I felt like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. I did not belong here. I belonged in the servants' quarters, scrubbing wine stains out of silk dresses. The entrance was intimidating. Massive glass doors framed in iron, a keypad, a camera with a red eye that seemed to stare right through my soul. I took a deep breath and reached for the intercom button, but before I could press it, the door buzzed and clicked open. A security guard was sitting behind a marble desk in the lobby. He was an older man, African American, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a uniform that looked sharper than most police officers. He watched me walk in, his expression unreadable. "Help you, miss?" he asked. His voice was deep, rumbling through the quiet lobby. I froze. This was it. He was going to kick me out. He was going to tell me I was at the wrong place. I am here for Loft 3B, I stammered, my voice sounding thin and weak in the cavernous space. The guard's eyebrows shot up. He looked down at a tablet on his desk, tapping the screen twice. Then he looked back at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Name?" "Violet," I whispered. "Violet Henry." I braced myself for the rejection. "Sorry, no Violet Henry listed. Please leave." Instead, the guard's face softened. A look of recognition, and something else, maybe respect, crossed his features. He stood up, straightening his jacket. "Ms. Henry?" he said, nodding. "We have been expecting you. Mr. Walter said you might come by eventually." My jaw dropped. He did?" "He left strict instructions," the guard said. He reached under the desk and pressed a button. The light above the elevator bank turned green. He said if you showed up with the key, you were to be given immediate access, no questions asked, no logs made. He looked at me pointedly. No logs made. That meant no paper trail, no visitor record for Vanessa to find. "Thank you," I breathed, feeling a wave of relief so strong it nearly knocked me over. "Elevator on the right," he directed. "Scan the key fob in the car to get to the 3rd floor." I walked to the elevator, my legs feeling like jelly. I pulled the key out. I had not noticed before, but the head of the key had a small black chip embedded in it, a transponder. I stepped into the elevator and held the key up to the panel. It beeped, and the button for the 3rd floor lit up automatically. The doors slid shut, sealing me in a silent silver box. As I ascended, my anxiety began to morph into something else, a strange, vibrating anticipation. Grandpa had set this up. He had planned this. He had hidden a multi-million-dollar secret right under Vanessa's nose. The elevator dinged. The doors opened directly into a small, private vestibule. There was only one door. It was made of heavy, dark wood, with the number 3B in burnished brass. I stepped out. The hallway was silent. The air smelled faintly of cedar and vanilla. It smelled expensive. My hand shook as I raised the key to the lock. I had to use both hands to steady it. I slid the metal into the cylinder. It fit perfectly. With a smooth, satisfying click, the deadbolt retracted. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. I expected a storage unit, even after seeing the building. Part of me still expected boxes. I expected stacks of old tax returns, dusty furniture, maybe some family heirlooms Grandpa wanted to hide. I was not prepared for what I saw. I stepped inside, and the lights flickered on automatically, triggered by a motion sensor. It was breathtaking. The loft was massive, high ceilings with exposed timber beams stretched overhead. One entire wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the Willamette River and the bridges glowing in the twilight. The floor was polished concrete, softened by thick, plush Persian rugs. But it was not just a beautiful apartment, it was a home. And it was not Grandpa's home. I walked further in, my footsteps echoing softly. To my left was a kitchen that looked like something out of a culinary magazine, gleaming stainless steel appliances, a marble island, a rack of copper pots. On the counter, there was a stand mixer in pastel blue, the exact color I had told Grandpa I wanted 3 years ago when I talked about taking up baking. I walked into the living area. There were bookshelves lining the walls, filled with books. I pulled one out, Pride and Prejudice, my favorite. I pulled out another, a textbook on advanced data analytics and Python programming. I spun around, taking it all in. The furniture was modern but cozy, upholstered in deep velvets and soft linens. There was a desk near the window, a massive oak piece with a dual monitor setup that was better than the one I had at Northline. This place, it was furnished for me. It was not a storage unit for old junk. It was a life. It was a sanctuary. I walked toward the desk, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. On the center of the desk, sitting on top of a leather blotter, was a single, thick manila envelope. It had my name on it. For Violet. The handwriting was shaky, unmistakable. I reached out and touched the paper. It was real. I was standing in a fortress that my grandfather had built for me, a place where Vanessa's voice could not reach, where I was not a servant, where I was not a failure. I looked around the room again, tears pricking my eyes. The warmth of the loft wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in 7 years, since my mother died, I felt safe. But beneath the safety, a question burned brighter than the city lights outside. How? How had he done this? And what was in the envelope that was so dangerous it had to be hidden behind a $2 million door? I sat down in the leather chair behind the desk. It groaned softly, welcoming me. I picked up the envelope. It was heavy. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The heavy cream envelope felt like a bomb in my hands. My name was scrawled across the front in ink that had slightly bled into the paper, a testament to the tremor in my grandfather's hand. I sat there for a long moment, the silence of the loft wrapping around me. It was a silence different from the one at the estate. That silence was heavy, loaded with unsaid criticisms and the fear of stepping on a floorboard too loudly. This silence was expectant. It was waiting for me. I slid my finger under the seal and ripped it open. Inside, there were several stiff legal documents and a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper. I unfolded the letter first. My dearest Violet, if you are reading this, it means things have gotten bad enough that you finally used the key. I am sorry. I am so sorry that I could not protect you the way a grandfather should. I know you think I am just a confused old man staring at the garden, but I have seen everything. I saw how she moved your mother's things. I saw how she pushed you into the background. I saw the bruises you tried to hide with makeup. I wanted to fight her, Violet, but Vanessa is smarter than your father, and she is more ruthless than anyone I have ever met in business. If I had challenged her openly, she would have cut me off from you completely. She would have put me in a home where I could not watch over you. So I played the part. I let my mouth hang open. I let my hand shake more than it needed to. I let her think she had won so she would stop looking over her shoulder. But while she was busy redecorating my house, I was busy securing your future. I had to stop reading. The tears that I had been holding back since the party finally spilled over, hot and fast. He had known. All those times I thought he was looking through me. He was actually watching over me. He had played the fool to stay close to me. I wiped my eyes and continued. This loft is not mine, Violet. It is yours. I bought it through a shell company 3 years ago, before the stroke, and placed it in a blind trust. The deed is in this envelope. Vanessa knows about the main accounts. She knows about the stocks. She thinks she has her claws in everything, but she does not know about the Palladium Trust. This loft, and the account attached to it, are untouchable. They are yours. You have a home. Violet, you have always had a home. I reached for the legal documents. There it was, a deed of transfer, a trust agreement. My eyes scanned the numbers. The operating account for the trust had a balance of $500,000. $500,000. It was not a fortune compared to the main estate, but to me, it was freedom. It was enough to quit my job if I wanted. It was enough to never have to kneel and clean up broken glass for Vanessa ever again. But the letter continued. The money and the apartment are your shield. Violet, but you are going to need a sword. Open the metal box. I looked at the desk. Tucked behind the dual monitors was a gray, nondescript lockbox. I found a small silver key taped to the bottom of the letter. My heart began to hammer against my ribs again, a painful, thudding rhythm. I unlocked the box. Inside, there was a portable hard drive and a pair of headphones. I plugged the drive into the computer tower that sat beneath the desk. The screen flickered to life, asking for a password. I typed in the one word Grandpa had written at the bottom of the letter. Madeline, my mother's name. The folder opened. It was organized with terrifying precision. Folders were labeled by date and type. Audio, video, financials. I clicked on the folder marked audio. There were dozens of files. I clicked on the most recent one, dated just 2 days before the party. The sound was crystal clear. It must have been recorded on a high-quality device hidden somewhere near Grandpa's wheelchair. Sign it, Walter. Vanessa's voice cut through the speakers. It was not the sweet voice she used in public. It was cold, flat, and menacing. I cannot read it, Grandpa's voice replied, sounding weak and confused. My glasses. You do not need to read it, Vanessa snapped. I heard the sound of paper being shoved across a table. It is just the authorization for the new nurses. Do you want to rot in your own filth? Sign the damn paper. Mark? Where is Mark? Mark is busy. Mark does not want to deal with your drooling and your shaking. He wants you to sign the paper so we can get on with our lives. Do it, or I swear to God, I will leave you in this room until you starve. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I knew she was mean. I knew she was manipulative. But this was abuse. This was criminal. I clicked on another file, dated 6 months ago. You are pathetic, Vanessa's voice sneered. Look at you. You used to be a titan of industry. Now you are just a burden. You are sucking the life out of this family. And that granddaughter of yours? Violet? She is just waiting for you to die so she can cash out. She hates you. Walter. She told me so herself. Liar, Grandpa mumbled on the recording. Oh, she hates you. Vanessa laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. She complains about coming to see you. She says you smell. She says she wishes you would just hurry up and go. I slammed my fist on the desk. No, I screamed at the empty room. I never said that. Never. She had been poisoning him against me. She had been trying to break his heart while he was trapped in that chair. And he had endured it. He had sat there and recorded it, letting her pour poison in his ear just so he could catch her doing it. I was shaking so hard I could barely control the mouse. I navigated to the video folder. There was a file labeled Kitchen Security Cam Backup. I clicked play. The grainy footage showed the kitchen of the main estate. It was late at night. Vanessa was standing by the island, drinking wine. My father, Mark, was leaning against the counter, looking tired. We have to do it, Mark, Vanessa said, swirling her glass. The facility in Arizona is perfect. It is specialized for his condition. Arizona is 2,000 miles away, Vanessa, my father said. He sounded defeated. Violet will be upset. She visits him every day. Violet is the problem, Vanessa hissed, slamming her glass down. "Do you not see? She is obsessed with him. It is unhealthy. She is clinging to the past. And honestly, Mark, having her living in the cottage, it is not working. We need privacy. We are newlyweds. Practically. We have been married for 6 years, Vanessa, and we have never been alone. She is always there, lurking, with those sad cow eyes. I want her out. Mark, once Walter is in Arizona, I want the cottage cleared out. We can turn it into a studio for me, or a guest house for people who actually matter." "Where will she go?" Mark asked. "She is 27. She has a job. Let her figure it out. Stop coddling her." Vanessa walked over to him and ran her hands up his chest. "Do you not want to be free, Mark? Do you not want it to be just us? No heavy burdens, no depressed daughters, just us and the money Walter built up? We deserve it." My father stood there for a long moment, on the screen. I watched the man who had raised me, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had held me when my mother died. I watched him struggle. And then I watched him surrender. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, set it up. But we tell Violet it is temporary, just for the winter." "Of course," Vanessa smiled, kissing him. "We will tell her whatever she needs to hear." The video ended. I sat back in the chair, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The betrayal was absolute. It was not just Vanessa. It was him. My father had agreed to ship his own father across the country and kick his daughter onto the street, all because he was too weak to say no to his wife. I looked at the last paragraph of Grandpa's letter. "They are planning to move me next week. Violet, they have the papers drawn up. Vanessa has been liquidating assets, moving money into accounts she controls. She thinks I am too far gone to notice, but I have tracked every penny. The folder marked Financials has the forensic accounting of every dollar she has stolen from the estate. It is enough to send her to prison for 20 years. But you have to be careful. She is dangerous. If she knows you have this, she will come for you. That is why you must stay in the loft. The security here is impenetrable. Do not go back to the cottage. Do not go back to the house. I have given you the sword. Violet, now you have to decide if you are brave enough to swing it." I looked around the beautiful loft. I looked at the blue stand mixer that he had bought because he remembered a conversation from 3 years ago. I looked at the books he had chosen for me. I looked at the view of the city he had given me. He had built me a lifeboat, but he had also handed me the detonator to blow up my entire life. If I used this evidence, I would destroy my father. I would humiliate the family name. I would be the girl who sued her own parents. But then I touched my cheek. It was still tender where she had slapped me. I remembered the way the guests had looked away. I remembered my father looking at his beer while I bled. I remembered Vanessa's voice on the recording, threatening to starve an old man. This was not a family. It was a hostage situation, and Grandpa Walter was the hostage. I wiped the last tear from my face. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. I was not the sad girl with the cow eyes. I was not the servant. I was Violet Henry, and I was holding a hard drive that was about to turn Vanessa's perfect world into ash. I reached for the phone on the desk. A landline, secure, just like everything else here. I dialed the number for the reception desk downstairs. "Front desk, this is Marcus," the guard's deep voice answered. "Marcus," I said, my voice surprising me with its strength. It sounded like Grandpa's voice. "This is Violet Henry in 3B. I need you to lock down the elevator access to my floor. No one comes up unless I explicitly authorize it, not even family." "Understood. Ms. Henry," Marcus replied instantly. "We are already in protocol. You are safe." I hung up the phone. I looked at the hard drive glowing with a soft blue light. I was safe, but Vanessa was not. I pulled up the folder marked Financials. It was time to see exactly how much she had stolen. It was time to build my case. I opened the first spreadsheet, and as the columns of numbers filled the screen, numbers that represented my grandfather's life work being siphoned off into Vanessa's private offshore accounts, I felt a cold, hard smile touch my lips. She had slapped me for spilling water. I was about to hit her with a tidal wave. The morning sun hitting the floor-to-ceiling windows of the loft did not feel like a wake-up call. It felt like the start of a mission clock. I had spent the night going through the files, my eyes burning, my soul oscillating between rage and cold. Hard calculation. I had the evidence. I had the safe house. Now, I needed a weapon that could fire in court. I picked up my secure landline and dialed Kara. It was barely 7 in the morning, but I knew she would be up. "Tell me you are okay," Kara said the moment she picked up. "I have been texting you since last night." "I am better than okay," I said, my voice steady. "But I need a favor. A big one. I need a lawyer. Kara. But not just any lawyer. I need someone who hates bullies. I need someone who specializes in elder law and fraud, and who is not afraid to take on the Henry name." Kara did not hesitate. "Ethan Cole. He is my cousin's husband. He used to be a prosecutor, but he switched to private practice after his grandmother got scammed out of her pension by a nursing home. He is a pit bull. Violet, if you have meat, he will bite." "I have the whole cow," I said. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a nondescript office in downtown Portland. Ethan Cole was not what I expected. He was young, maybe 35, with rolled-up sleeves and a desk buried under mountains of paper. He did not look like the polished corporate sharks my father employed. He looked like a guy who got into fights and won them. I handed him the hard drive. I did not say much. I just told him to listen to the file marked Kitchen Conversation 04. Ethan put on his headphones. I watched his face. For the first minute, he was neutral. Then, his jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. By the time he took the headphones off, he looked like he wanted to punch a wall. "This is admissible," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording in-person conversations if you are a participant. But even though you were not in the room, the camera was in a common area of a home where the owner, your grandfather, presumably consented to its installation. And the threat? Starve you? That is criminal menace. That is immediate grounds for emergency guardianship." "I have more," I said, sliding the financial spreadsheets across the desk. "She is moving money, fast." Ethan scanned the papers. "Shell companies, consulting fees paid to entities that do not exist. She is draining the liquidity before she dumps him in a facility. Violet, this is a nuclear bomb. We can bury her." "Then let's do it," I said, leaning forward. "Let's file today." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, not yet." "Why not? She is going to move him." "If we file today, she gets alerted," Ethan explained, leaning back. "She has your father's power of attorney. She has the legal high ground right now. If we strike prematurely, she will claim the recordings are doctored. She will claim the money moves were authorized by your father. She will destroy any physical paper trails left in the house. We need to catch her in a lie she cannot talk her way out of. We need to wait until she makes the final move." "The party," I realized. She mentioned a party, a family future dinner. "Exactly," Ethan said. "Let her think she has won. Let her stand up in front of witnesses and lie, and then we drop the hammer." He looked me dead in the eye. "But this means you have to go back there, Violet. You have to play the part. You have to be the beaten dog. If she suspects for 1 second that you have teeth, she will accelerate the timeline. Can you do that?" I thought about the slap. I thought about the way my father looked at his shoes. "I can do it," I said. The next week was the hardest acting performance of my life. I went back to the estate every evening after work. I parked my car in the usual spot. I walked into the house with my head down. I wore minimal makeup, letting the fading bruise on my cheek serve as a reminder of my place in the pecking order. Vanessa was suspicious at first. When I walked into the kitchen that first night, she was chopping vegetables with a knife that looked far too sharp. "I see you decided to show your face," she said, not looking up. "I assumed you would be hiding in a motel somewhere." "I have nowhere else to go, Vanessa," I said quietly, staring at the floor. I checked my bank account. I cannot afford a deposit on a new apartment right now. It was a lie. I had $500,000 in the Palladium Trust, but it was the lie she wanted to hear. Vanessa stopped chopping. She turned to me, a smug smile spreading across her face. Well, at least you are finally being realistic. You can stay in the cottage for another month. But after that, you are out. Mark and I need the space. I understand, I said. I am sorry about the party. I was emotional. You were hysterical, she corrected. But I accept your apology. Now, take this trash out. It smells. I took the bag. I walked outside. And as soon as I was round the corner, out of sight of the cameras, I let out a breath that shook my entire body. It was working. She thought I was broken. But every night, I retreated to the loft. That was my sanity. It was my fortress. I would drive to Portland, park 2 blocks away, and slip into the building like a ghost. There, I was not the victim. I was the analyst. I spent hours combing through the data on the hard drive. It was a masterclass in embezzlement. Vanessa had set up 3 limited liability companies in Nevada. She was billing the Henry estate for property management, lifestyle consulting, and medical coordination. The amounts were staggering. $15,000 here, $22,000 there. I built a timeline. Every time she transferred money, it coincided with a period where she had isolated Grandpa from visitors. She was using his isolation to rob him blind. I sent everything to Ethan. We were building a binder thick enough to kill a man. But the most terrifying part was watching the plan for Grandpa unfold. One evening, I was dusting the library, a chore Vanessa had assigned me. When I heard her on the phone in the next room, I froze, blending into the shadows of the bookshelves. The transport is booked for next Tuesday, she was saying. Yes, early morning, 4 o'clock. We want him out before the neighbors wake up. I do not want a scene with the granddaughter. Next Tuesday, that was 6 days away. And the house? She continued. Yes, list it the day he leaves. I want it sold by Christmas. Mark is sentimental, but he will get over it once he sees the check. My blood ran cold. She was selling the estate, my childhood home, the place my mother had died. She was going to liquidate everything and vanish. I needed to warn Grandpa. Access to him was almost impossible. Vanessa had hired a new nurse, a woman named Helga, who looked like she wrestled bears for fun. Helga never left his side. But on Thursday, I got my chance. Vanessa was out at a spa appointment, and Helga went to the bathroom. I slipped into Grandpa's room. He was sitting by the window, staring at the rain. He looked frailer than ever, his skin like parchment paper. "Grandpa," I whispered, kneeling beside his chair. His head snapped toward me. The fog in his eyes cleared instantly. "Violet," he croaked, "is it safe?" "For a minute," I said fast. "I have the drive. I have a lawyer. His name is Ethan Cole. We are ready, Grandpa. But she is moving you Tuesday. We have to stop it before then." Grandpa gripped my hand. His fingers were cold, but his grip was iron. "No, do not stop the movers. Let them come." "What, Grandpa? No, they are taking you to Arizona." "They will try," he said, a mischievous glint appearing in his eye. "But they will not get far. Listen to me. Violet, there is one more thing. The drive proves she is a thief, but we need to prove she has no power." He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a small, folded piece of velvet. He pressed it into my hand. "What is this?" I asked. "It is the ace," he whispered. "She thinks she has power of attorney because she coerced Mark into signing it. She thinks she controls the trust, but she forgot the bylaws of the Henry family charter. It was written 50 years ago." I frowned. "The charter? I thought that was just a ceremonial thing." "It is legally binding," Grandpa hissed, his eyes darting to the door. "And it states that in the event of a dispute over the competency of the patriarch, power does not go to the spouse, it does not go to the son." He leaned in closer. "It goes to the eldest grandchild, provided they are of sound mind and employed in the family interest." My mouth fell open. Me? You, he said firmly. But you need the seal, the ring. She has been looking for it for months. She tore my room apart. She thinks I lost it. I opened the velvet cloth. Inside was his signet ring, the heavy gold ring with the Henry crest that he used to wear every day. Put it on, he commanded. Not now, at the dinner. When she tries to declare me incompetent, when she tries to sign my life away, you stand up, you show the ring, and you recite the charter clause. Ethan will know what to do with it. Grandpa, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. You planned all of this. I had a lot of time to think. He smiled weakly. Now go. Helga is flushing. I shoved the ring into my bra just as the bathroom door opened. Helga stepped out, looking suspicious. What are you doing here? She barked. Just saying hello, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. He is my grandfather, after all. I walked out of the room, my heart pounding a war drum's rhythm. I had the evidence. I had the lawyer. And now, I had the crown jewels. I went back to the loft that night and called Ethan. Change of plans, I told him. We are not just going to stop her. We are going to evict her. What do you mean? Ethan asked. Grandpa gave me the ring, I said. And he told me about the charter. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, I heard the sound of papers rustling. I am looking at the charter bylaws right now, Ethan said, his voice rising with excitement. Holy smoke. Violet, he is right. Section 4, paragraph 2. The keeper of the seal shall hold tie-breaking authority in all matters of estate disposition. This is archaic. It is medieval. And under Oregon contract law, it is totally valid because the trust was incorporated under it. She is holding a dinner on Sunday, I said. She calls it the Family Future Dinner. She is going to announce the sale of the house. That is the kill zone, Ethan said. Sunday night, the Crestview Hall? Yes. I will be there, Ethan said. I will have the police, the forensic accountant, and a judge I know who owes me a favor on speed dial. You just make sure you are wearing that ring. I will, I said. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I touched the ring hidden against my skin. Vanessa thought she was walking into a coronation. She had no idea she was walking into an execution. Sunday was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one bringing the fire. The atmosphere in the Henry estate during those final days was not just tense, it was toxic, like breathing air laced with carbon monoxide. You could not smell it or taste it, but it was slowly killing everything it touched. On Friday morning, the final blow landed. I walked into the kitchen to find a glossy brochure sitting in the center of the breakfast table. It was a mock-up for a real estate listing. The cover featured a stunning high-definition drone shot of our house, the morning sun glinting off the slate roof and the manicured gardens. Across the top, in elegant gold font, it read, Prestigious Estate in Pinebrook. Asking price, $3.2 million. My stomach dropped to my shoes. I looked at my father. Mark. He was drinking his coffee, staring intently at the sports section, refusing to look at the brochure or me. Vanessa was standing by the espresso machine, humming a tune I did not recognize. She looked vibrant, energized, like a vampire who had just fed. Dad, I said, my voice trembling. This time, I did not have to fake the tremor. Seeing my childhood home packaged as a product for strangers to buy hurt in a visceral, physical way. What is this? Mark sighed, a long, weary sound that signaled he had rehearsed this conversation and just wanted to get it over with. He folded his newspaper but still did not meet my eyes. It is just an exploration, Violet, he said, staring at his mug. Market conditions are favorable right now. We have to be practical. The upkeep on this place is astronomical. With your grandfather moving to Arizona. It just does not make sense to keep a 6-bedroom house for 2 people. Practical? I repeated, gripping the back of a chair. Dad, Grandpa built this house. Mom planted those rose bushes in the back. You cannot just sell it like it is a used car. It is brick and mortar. Violet, Vanessa cut in, her voice sharp. She walked over and tapped a manicured fingernail on the brochure. Stop being so sentimental. It is embarrassing. Your father and I need to downsize. We want a fresh start. Somewhere modern. Somewhere without baggage. By baggage, she meant me, and the memories of my mother, and the lingering presence of the man she was about to ship off to the desert. But where will I go? I asked, widening my eyes, letting the panic bleed into my voice. The cottage is part of the property. Vanessa smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of any warmth. Exactly. When the house sells, the cottage goes with it, which means you need to be out. Mark and I discussed it. We think 30 days is generous. Do you not? My father flinched slightly but nodded. It is time you stood on your own 2 feet. Violet, you have a good job. You should be independent. Independent? I choked out. I pay rent. I buy my own food. I am independent. You are just kicking me out. We are liquefying assets to ensure the family's future, Vanessa snapped, slamming her hand on the table. And quite frankly, Violet, you do not fit into that future. You have no role here anymore. You are a reminder of a time Mark wants to move past. So, stop whining and start packing. I stared at them. I let my lip quiver. I let tears well up in my eyes. I slumped my shoulders, making myself look small, defeated, and broken. Fine, I whispered, wiping my eyes. Fine, I will look for a place. Good, Vanessa said, smoothing her silk robe. See? That was not so hard. She turned back to her espresso, satisfied. She thought she had broken me. She thought I was cornered. She had no idea that while she was planning to sell the house for $3.2 million, I was systematically dismantling her entire financial safety net. That night, I fled to the loft. The moment the heavy door of Unit 3B clicked shut behind me, the crying act dropped. My face hardened into stone. I sat at the desk and logged into the Palladium Trust interface. Grandpa's letter had given me full administrative access. I pulled up the internal transfer protocols. Vanessa was smart, but she was greedy. In her haste to consolidate assets before shipping Grandpa away, she had moved significant chunks of the family's liquid capital into a holding account that was technically still under the umbrella of Henry Logistics, a company my grandfather still legally chaired. Because the Palladium Trust was a majority shareholder entity, something Vanessa had missed in her due diligence because the paperwork was filed 30 years ago, I had override authority. I watched the screen as I executed a series of internal transfers. I did not steal the money. I simply moved it. I shifted $400,000 from the accessible operating account into a secured escrow sub-account that required 2 signatures to release. One signature was mine, the other was Grandpa's. Vanessa would go to pay the deposit for the Arizona facility on Monday and find the account frozen. She would scream at the bank. They would tell her it was a compliance hold. By the time she unraveled it, it would be too late. But Vanessa was not done with her traps. On Saturday morning, she found me in the kitchen packing a box of books. She held out a clipboard with a document attached. "Since you are leaving," she said casually, "I need you to sign this. It is just a formality for the insurance company. Since you have been living on the property, they need a liability waiver stating you have no claims against the homeowner regarding the condition of the cottage." I took the clipboard. The document looked standard. Lots of dense legal jargon about premises liability and hazardous conditions. "I will sign it later," I said, putting it on top of my box. "I have to get to work." "Sign it now, Violet," she pressed, her eyes narrowing. "It takes 2 seconds. Do not be difficult." "I am running late. Vanessa, I will leave it on the counter tonight." I grabbed the clipboard and walked out before she could stop me. I drove straight to Ethan Cole's office. Ethan took one look at the document and let out a low whistle. "She is evil," he said, tossing the paper onto his desk. "This is not a liability waiver. Look at paragraph 4, subsection C." I leaned in. The text was tiny. The undersigned acknowledges that the primary resident, Walter Henry, has been in a state of advanced cognitive decline for a period of no less than 24 months, rendering him incapable of managing property or personnel. If you sign this, Ethan said, tapping the page, you are formally attesting that Walter has been incompetent for 2 years. That predates the updated will. It predates the activation of the Palladium Trust, and most importantly, it nullifies the charter clause you are planning to use. My blood ran cold. The charter requires the patriarch to be of sound mind when the seal is passed, or at least for the heir to be appointed before decline. If I sign this, I am admitting he has been gone for years. It makes the ring useless. Exactly, Ethan said. She knows you are the only biological heir who might have a claim. She is trying to trick you into signing away your rights before you even know you have them. What do I do? I asked. If I do not sign it, she will get suspicious. Ethan smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. Spill coffee on it, tear it, lose it, stall her until Sunday night. You just need to survive 48 more hours. I went back to the house and played the part of the chaotic, falling-apart stepdaughter to perfection. I left rental applications for cheap, run-down apartments on the kitchen counter where I knew she would see them. I circled ads for basement studios that cost $800 a month. I wanted her to see me struggling. I wanted her to believe I was destitute. When she asked about the document, I told her I had packed it by mistake in one of the boxes I had already moved to my car. I will dig it out. Vanessa, I promise, I said, sounding frantic. I am just so overwhelmed. I cannot find anything. You are pathetic, she sneered. Just find it by tomorrow night. I want everything clean before the dinner. The dinner. The family future dinner was scheduled for Sunday evening at the Crestview Hall. Vanessa had invited 30 of the family's closest friends and business associates. It was ostensibly a farewell party for Grandpa, but everyone knew it was Vanessa's victory lap. It was her coronation as the new matriarch of the Henry fortune. On Saturday afternoon, I managed to sneak into Grandpa's room one last time. The new nurse, Helga, was in the hallway on her phone. I slipped inside. Grandpa was in bed. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his mouth hung open, and a line of drool ran down his chin. For a second, panic seized me. Had he actually taken a turn for the worse? Had the stress finally broken him? Grandpa? I whispered, leaning over him. One eye popped open. It was bright blue and alert. He winked. Showtime soon? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Tomorrow night, I said. 7 o'clock. Are you ready? I have been ready for 5 years, he murmured. Did you move the money? $400,000 secured. She will hit a wall on Monday morning. Good girl, he wheezed. Then he closed his eye and let his jaw go slack again, instantly transforming back into a vegetable. I squeezed his hand and slipped out. Sunday arrived with a heavy gray sky. The air felt charged, like the ozone smell before a lightning strike. I spent the day packing. I filled my car with boxes of old clothes and books, making a show of hauling them out to the driveway while Vanessa watched from the window, sipping wine. At 5 o'clock, I started getting ready for the party. Vanessa had told me to dress appropriately, which in her language meant faded into the background, but I was done fading. I went to my closet, hidden in the back, behind the drab cardigans and sensible slacks I wore to keep the peace, was a dress I had bought 3 years ago and never worn. It was a deep, midnight blue velvet. It was structured, sharp, and elegant. It was a power suit disguised as an evening gown. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun. I applied my makeup with precision. No more hiding the bruise. It was gone now, healed, but I used contour to sharpen my cheekbones until they looked like cut glass. I reached into my jewelry box and pulled out the velvet pouch Grandpa had given me. The ring. It was heavy gold, etched with the Henry family crest, a lion holding a key. It was large, designed for a man's hand, but I slipped it onto my right index finger. It was loose, but I curled my finger to hold it in place. It felt warm. It felt like armor. I put on a pair of black gloves over it. Vanessa could not see the ring yet, not until the moment was right. I walked out to my car. As I drove toward the Crestview Hall, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Assets frozen. Forensic accountant is in the van. Police are on standby for the fraud charge. We are green. Give them hell. I took a deep breath. Vanessa was expecting a funeral for my life. She was expecting me to sit quietly in the corner while she announced that my home was being sold and my grandfather was being exiled. She was expecting Violet the victim. She was about to meet Violet the CEO. I pulled into the valet line at the Crestview Hall. The building was lit up, glowing against the night sky. It was one of the properties my grandfather's trust owned, though Vanessa thought she controlled the management contract. I handed my keys to the valet. I smoothed my velvet dress. I checked the glove on my right hand. I walked up the steps. The doors opened. The noise of the party spilled out. Laughter, clinking glasses, jazz music, the sound of people celebrating a theft they did not even know was happening. I stepped across the threshold. The game was over. The war had begun. The invitation for the execution of my family legacy arrived via email at 6 a.m. on Sunday. It was not a paper card with embossed lettering like the ones sent to the 30 other guests. It was a digital calendar invite, stark and impersonal, with a subject line that read, Family Future Discussion. The body of the email was brief, written in Vanessa's characteristic tone which managed to be both polite and dismissive simultaneously. Violet, please join us at the Crestview Hall tonight at 7 o'clock. We need to finalize the logistics for your grandfather's transition to the Arizona facility and discuss your living arrangements moving forward. Please try to look presentable. We have important guests. I stared at the screen of my phone, lying in the bed of the loft that my grandfather had secretly bought for me. The morning light was gray and heavy against the panoramic windows, reflecting the steel of the Portland bridges. Transition, that was her word for exile. Living arrangements, that was her word for homelessness. I did not reply. I simply got out of bed and walked to the kitchen, where my war counsel was waiting. Ethan Cole was already on his third cup of coffee. He had spread the documents out over the marble island like a general mapping a battlefield. Next to him sat a woman I had only met an hour ago, Sarah Jenkins from the Office of Adult Protective Services. She was dressed in a beige suit that screamed bureaucracy, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently scanning the transcript of Vanessa threatening to starve my grandfather. The venue is confirmed, Ethan said without looking up as I poured myself a mug. The Crestview Hall. It is fitting. High ceilings, expensive wine, nowhere to hide. Is Mr. Abernathy ready? I asked, leaning against the counter. Mr. Abernathy was my grandfather's oldest friend and his personal attorney for 40 years. Vanessa had fired him 2 years ago, claiming he was too expensive and out of touch, replacing him with a corporate firm that did whatever she asked. But she did not know that the original copy of the family trust and the all-important charter was still sitting in a fireproof safe in Abernathy's study. Abernathy is more than ready. Ethan grinned, a wolfish expression. He has been waiting 2 years to take a swing at her. He will walk in at my signal. But Violet, remember the trigger. I know, I said. She has to say it. She has to publicly declare that she is selling the house and moving him against his will. She has to commit to the act. Sarah Jenkins looked up from the file. And she has to demonstrate negligence or abuse. Based on these recordings, we have enough for an investigation. But if you want immediate emergency guardianship tonight, I need to see imminent danger. I need to see that she is acting not just selfishly, but maliciously. You will see it, I promised her. Just watch how she treats him when she thinks no one is looking. The day dragged on in a blur of nervous energy. I spent hours in the loft, pacing back and forth, rehearsing my lines in my head. I felt like an actor about to step onto a stage where the props were real and the bullets were live. At 5:30, I began to dress. I put on the midnight blue velvet dress I had retrieved from the closet. It was heavy, regal, and dark, a stark contrast to the pastels Vanessa usually forced me to wear. I pulled my hair back so tight it pulled at my temples. I applied my makeup with the precision of war paint. And then, the final piece, I pulled on a pair of long black satin gloves. Underneath the right glove, on my index finger, sat the heavy gold signet ring, the seal of the Henry family. It was hidden, a lump of metal against my skin, waiting for the moment of revelation. I grabbed my purse. Inside, I placed the silver key to the loft. The key was my anchor. The ring was my sword. I drove to the Crestview Hall in silence. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. When I pulled up to the valet, the building was glowing like a lantern. It was one of the most exclusive venues in Pinebrook, a place where senators and CEOs held their daughters' weddings. Tonight, it was hosting a funeral for my life. I walked up the grand staircase. The air smelled of expensive lilies and roast beef. I could hear the hum of conversation drifting from the main ballroom. When I entered the room, the noise seemed to dip for a fraction of a second. Heads turned. People were used to seeing Violet the mouse, Violet the servant, Violet in the background holding a tray. They were not used to seeing this Violet. I stood tall, my shoulders back, the velvet dress catching the light. But I quickly softened my posture. I rounded my shoulders slightly. I lowered my head. I needed them to underestimate me for just one more hour. Vanessa was holding court near the center of the room. She looked magnificent in a shimmering silver gown that cost more than my car. She was clutching a champagne flute, her other hand resting possessively on my father's arm. Mark looked tired, his tuxedo slightly ill-fitting, a man who was shrinking while his wife grew larger. "Violet," Vanessa called out, her voice pitching up into that fake sweet register. "You made it, and you are wearing velvet. How dramatic." "I found it in the back of the closet," I said quietly, walking over to them. "I hope it is okay." "It is a bit heavy for the season," she sniffed, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "But at least you are covered up. Go find a seat at the back. We are about to start the speeches." I nodded and moved away, but I did not go to the back. I moved to a table near the side, close to the service entrance. From here, I had a clear view of the entire room. I saw Ethan standing near the bar, nursing a soda, looking like just another bored guest. I saw Sarah Jenkins sitting at a table with some of the nursing staff Vanessa had hired, blending in perfectly. And then, the double doors opened, and they wheeled him in. My heart broke. Grandpa Walter was slumped in his wheelchair, his head lolling to the side. They had dressed him in a tuxedo, but it looked wrong on his frail frame, like a costume on a skeleton. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were half closed, unfocused. Vanessa had staged this perfectly. She had probably skipped his afternoon medication or given him a sedative to make him look as pathetic as possible. She wanted everyone in this room to look at him and think, yes, it is time. He is gone. Putting him away is a mercy. A murmur of pity rippled through the crowd. "Poor Walter," a woman near me whispered. "He does not even know where he is." I gripped the stem of my water glass until my knuckles turned white under the black gloves. "Just wait," I told myself. "Just wait." Vanessa signaled the waiters. Dinner was served. Filet mignon and truffle mash, paid for by the money she was siphoning from the estate. The wine flowed. The guests laughed. It was a grotesque display of gluttony on the dime of a dying man. As the plates were cleared, Vanessa stood up. She tapped her spoon against her glass. The sharp ding-ding-ding cut through the chatter. The room fell silent. "Thank you," Vanessa began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "Thank you all for coming tonight. This is a difficult evening for us." She looked down at Walter, who was staring blankly at a centerpiece of white roses. She placed a hand on his shoulder. He did not react. "We all love Walter," Vanessa said, wiping a non-existent tear from her eye. "He built this family. He built this community. But as many of you know, the last few years have been a struggle. The stroke took so much from him, and despite our best efforts, despite Mark and I dedicating our lives to his care, it has become clear that he needs more help than we can provide at home." She paused for effect. Mark nodded solemnly beside her, looking at his shoes. It breaks my heart, Vanessa continued, her voice gaining strength. But we have made the decision to move Walter to the Palms in Arizona. It is a world-class facility where he can get the 24-hour medical attention he deserves. A polite ripple of nodding went through the room. They bought it. They bought the narrative of the loving, overwhelmed daughter-in-law making a tough choice. And, Vanessa added, her tone shifting to business, with this transition comes other changes. To ensure Walter's care is funded and to secure the family's future, Mark and I have decided to list the Pinebrook estate for sale next week. There was a gasp. The estate was a landmark. It is time to downsize, Vanessa said firmly, cutting off the whispers. It is time to simplify. We need to focus on the future, not the past. She turned her gaze directly toward me. Her eyes were cold, triumphant. She was smiling, but it was a smile of a predator who had finally cornered its prey. And that means changes for everyone, she said, addressing the room but speaking only to me. Violet will be moving on to her own life as well. It is time for the next generation to stop leaning on the legacy of the old and start building their own. We are all making sacrifices for the greater good. She raised her glass. So, please, raise a toast to Walter and to the future of the Henry family. To the future, the guests mumbled, raising their glasses. Mark raised his glass. I did not. The room was quiet, waiting for the toast to end. This was it. The moment she had committed. She had announced the move. She had announced the sale. She had publicly declared control. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the hardwood floor was loud in the silence. Vanessa looked at me, annoyance flickering in her eyes. Violet, sit down. We are toasting. No, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was steady. It carried across the room. Violet, do not make a scene, Mark hissed, finally looking up. Not now. We are not drinking to the future. Dad, I said, stepping away from the table. Because there is no future, not the one Vanessa imagined. Excuse me? Vanessa laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. Have you had too much wine, dear? Sit down before you embarrass yourself. I walked toward the center of the room. I could feel the eyes of every person on me. I felt the silver key in my pocket pressing against my hip. I felt the heavy gold ring under my glove. You said you are moving him to Arizona for his health, I said, stopping 10 feet from the head table. But that is a lie. You are moving him because he is the only witness to the fact that you have been stealing from him for 3 years. The silence in the room shattered. Gasps erupted. How dare you? Vanessa shrieked. Her face went red. Mark, get her out of here. She is crazy. I have the bank records, Vanessa, I said, my voice rising. I have the transfer logs to your shell companies in Nevada. I have the recordings of you threatening to starve him in his own kitchen. Vanessa froze. Her eyes darted around the room. She saw the guests whispering. She saw the cell phones coming out. You little brat, she hissed, dropping the facade entirely. You have nothing. You are a leech. You are just angry that I'm cutting you off. Mark, call security. 2 large men in black suits started to move toward me from the back of the room. Stay back, I ordered. Then, I turned to Grandpa Walter. He was still slumped in the chair. Vanessa looked at him, then back at me, regaining her confidence. Look at him, she shouted, pointing a manicured finger at the old man. He is a vegetable, Violet. He does not even know who you are. I am the one taking care of him. I am the one with the power of attorney. Actually, a deep voice boomed from the back of the room. Ethan Cole stepped forward, flanked by Mr. Abernathy. The power of attorney you forced Mark to sign is invalid, Ethan said, walking calmly toward the front, because it conflicts with the Henry family charter of 1975. The charter? Vanessa scoffed. That is a dusty old piece of paper. It means nothing. It means everything, Mr. Abernathy said, holding up a leather-bound document. It states that in the event of a dispute over the patriarch's capacity, the ultimate authority does not rest with the son nor the spouse. I raised my right hand. "It rests with the keeper of the seal," I said. I grabbed the fingertips of my black satin glove. With one smooth motion, I pulled it off. The gold ring gleamed under the chandeliers, the lion and the key, the symbol of the Henry legacy. Vanessa's face went white. She looked at the ring, then at my face. She recognized it. She had torn the house apart looking for it. "You stole that," she whispered. "You stole it from his room." "I did not steal it," I said, stepping closer to Grandpa. "It was given to me." I placed my hand on Grandpa's shoulder. "Grandpa," I said softly. And then, the moment came, the moment we had all been waiting for. Walter Henry, the man who had sat motionless for 2 hours, the man who was supposedly a vegetable, slowly lifted his head. He blinked, clearing the act from his eyes. He sat up straight, his spine stiffening with a strength that seemed impossible. He looked directly at Vanessa. "She did not steal it, Vanessa," his voice rasped, weak but distinct, echoing in the silent hall. "I gave it to her, because she is the only one in this room who is not trying to bury me." The room erupted. The silence that followed my grandfather's voice was not the peaceful silence of a library or a church. It was the suffocating, heavy silence of a bomb site right after the explosion, where the dust hangs in the air and the ringing in your ears hasn't quite stopped. For 3 seconds, no one breathed. The guests, who had been politely sipping their Chardonnay moments ago, were now staring at the head table with mouths agape. They looked from the invalid old man sitting bolt upright to the stepmother whose face had drained of every drop of blood. Vanessa was the first to move. Her survival instinct, honed by years of manipulation, kicked in with a desperate, frantic energy. She did not retreat. She attacked. "He is confused!" she screeched, her voice cracking. Destroying the elegant facade she had maintained all evening, she lunged toward Grandpa, grabbing his shoulder with a grip that looked painful. "It is the medication. I told you, Mark, I told you the new dosage makes him hallucinate. He does not know what he is saying." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wild, pleading. "Please, everyone, do not listen to this. It is the dementia talking. He thinks he is back in the boardroom. It is tragic, really." She was trying to shove the genie back into the bottle with her bare hands. "He sounded pretty clear to me." "Vanessa," a voice called out from the back. It was Mr. Henderson, a former business rival of Grandpa's. "He is delirious," Vanessa shouted back, spittle flying from her lips. She spun around to face me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it felt like physical heat. "And you did this. You gave him something, didn't you? You slipped him stimulants before the dinner just to stage this little stunt." "I did not give him anything, Vanessa," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "I just gave him a reason to wake up." Vanessa laughed, a high-pitched, jagged sound that grated on the nerves. She grabbed the microphone from the stand, her knuckles white. She needed to control the narrative. She needed to destroy my credibility before anyone started asking real questions. "A reason?" she sneered into the mic, the sound booming through the speakers. "You? You are the reason for all his stress. Ladies and gentlemen, you want the truth? You want to know why we have to sell the estate?" She pointed a shaking finger at me. "It is because of her, Violet, the almost 30 failure who refuses to leave the nest. She bleeds us dry. She lives in our guest cottage for free, eats our food, drives a car we paid for, and she still complains. She is a leech." The room murmured. I saw some guests look at me with doubt. Vanessa was good at this. She mixed lies with just enough truth. I did live in the cottage, to make it believable. "We have to sell the house to pay for Walter's care because she has drained the accounts," Vanessa lied, her voice gaining confidence. "She steals from him. I have tried to protect you all from the shame of it, but there it is. She is a thief and a liar, and now she is using a senile old man as a puppet to humiliate me." It was a masterclass in projection. She was accusing me of the very crime she had committed. From a table near the front, my father's cousin, Aunt Linda, stood up. She was a no-nonsense woman who had never particularly liked Vanessa. "If you are selling the house for Walter's care," Linda asked, her voice cutting through the tension, "and Violet has been living there, what about her? What is Violet's share of the estate? Where is she supposed to go?" Vanessa looked at Linda, then back at me. A cruel, ugly smile twisted her lips. She lowered the microphone slightly, but everyone could still hear her. "Violet's share?" Vanessa scoffed. "Violet does not have a share. Violet deserves nothing. She is not even a real Henry. She is just the daughter of Mark's first mistake. And as for where she goes?" Vanessa stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. She smelled of fear and expensive perfume. "She can go to the street," Vanessa hissed, loud enough for the front tables to hear. "She can go to a shelter. I do not care where she goes. As long as she is out of my sight, she is trash. And tonight, I am finally taking out the garbage." The insult hung in the air, gross and unnecessary. Even Mark, who had been cowering in his seat, looked up, shocked by the venom in her voice. "Vanessa," my father started, his voice weak. "Shut up, Mark," she snapped without looking at him. She locked eyes with me. "Now get out. Get out of this hall. Get out of my life. Go pack your boxes, Violet, because tomorrow morning I am changing the locks." She shoved a piece of paper toward me across the table. It was the liability waiver I had refused to sign earlier, the one declaring Grandpa incompetent. "And sign this before you go," she commanded. "Sign it, admit you are a liar, and maybe I will give you $1,000 to get a bus ticket." I looked at the paper. I looked at the pen she was holding out. I took the paper. And then, slowly, deliberately, I tore it in half. I tore it again and again, until it was confetti in my gloved hands. I let the pieces flutter down onto the white tablecloth like snow. "I will not sign anything," I said, my voice ringing out clearly. "I will not sign away my grandfather's life, and I will not sign away my home." Vanessa stared at the torn paper. Her chest heaved. The vein in her forehead pulsed. She had lost. The crowd was watching. Her husband was watching. Her victim was standing tall. Something in her snapped. The veneer of the socialite cracked and fell away, revealing the violent, desperate creature underneath. "You insolent little bitch!" she screamed. And then she moved. It happened faster than anyone could react. She pulled her arm back and swung. Crack! The sound was louder than the first time. It echoed off the high ceilings of the Crestview Hall like a gunshot. Her hand connected with my left cheek, the same cheek she had bruised days ago. The force of the blow knocked my head to the side. My hair came loose from its bun. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the head table, tasting copper in my mouth. The room died. The murmurs stopped. The clinking of glasses stopped. The music had long since cut out. The only sound was Vanessa's heavy, ragged breathing and the soft rustle of silk as guests stood up in horror. Then, a sea of glowing rectangles rose in the darkness. Phones? Dozens of them. Every guest, every waiter, every person in that room was recording. They had captured it all. The insults, the rage, the assault. Vanessa stood there, her hand still raised, her chest heaving. She looked around, blinking, as if waking up from a trance. She saw the phones. She saw the looks of absolute disgust on the faces of the people she had tried so hard to impress. My father, Mark, stood up. He was shaking. His face was pale. He looked at his wife, then at his daughter holding her cheek. "Vanessa," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and realization. You just—" "She provoked me!" Vanessa shrieked, turning on him. "Did you see her? She tore the paper. She is ruining everything. Mark, tell them she deserves it." Mark looked at me. I was not crying this time. I was not looking at the floor. I slowly straightened up. I used the back of my gloved hand, the hand with the ring, to wipe a small trickle of blood from the corner of my lip. I looked at the blood on the black satin. I turned back to Vanessa. My cheek was burning like fire, but inside, I felt cold. I felt like ice. You like to hit people who cannot fight back, don't you, Vanessa? I asked quietly. You hit me in the backyard because you thought no one cared. You starve an old man in his room because you think no one is watching. Shut up, she screamed, raising her hand again. No, I said. You shut up. I took a step forward. She faltered, lowering her hand. You thought I was weak, I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. You thought because I served you tea and cleaned your messes that I was yours to kick, but you forgot who raised me. I pointed to Grandpa Walter, who was watching me with fierce pride in his eyes. He did not raise a victim, I said. He raised a Henry, and in this family, we do not steal, we do not lie, and we definitely do not hit our children. I looked out at the room, at the sea of faces, at the phones recording the end of her reign. Sit down, everyone, I commanded. My voice was not a request. It was an order. It was the voice of the CEO I was born to be. Please take your seats, I repeated, because the party is over, but the meeting is just beginning. I turned toward the back of the room and nodded once. Ethan, now! The double doors at the back of the hall swung open with a heavy thud. Ethan Cole walked in, but he was not alone. Behind him walked two uniformed police officers. Behind them was a woman carrying a laptop case, the forensic accountant, and behind her was a man in judicial robes who looked very, very unhappy to have been disturbed on a Sunday night. The entourage marched down the center aisle of the ballroom like an execution squad. The sound of their footsteps on the hardwood floor was a drumbeat of doom for Vanessa. Vanessa looked at the police. She looked at the judge. Her face crumbled. She grabbed Mark's arm, digging her nails into his tuxedo jacket. Mark, she whimpered. Mark, do something. Who are these people? Why are they here? Mark pulled his arm away. He stepped back from her, leaving her standing alone in the spotlight. Ethan stopped at the foot of the head table. He placed his briefcase on the white linen, right next to Vanessa's champagne glass. He popped the latches. Click, click. He looked up at Vanessa, his expression calm and professional. Vanessa Henry, Ethan said, his voice carrying to the back of the room. My name is Ethan Cole. I am the attorney representing the Palladium Trust and Mr. Walter Henry. He pulled a thick stack of documents from the case. We have a lot to talk about, Ethan said, starting with embezzlement, moving on to elder abuse, and finishing with the assault we all just witnessed. He gestured to the guests holding their phones. I think we have enough witnesses for that last one, don't you? Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at me. I was standing next to Grandpa. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I looked back at her, touching the ring on my finger. I told you, I said softly. The truth always comes out. It just needed a key to unlock it. I turned to the room, to the stunned audience. I apologize for the disruption, I said, but if you will give us a moment, we have some family future to discuss, and this time, it is going to be honest. Ethan Cole did not shout. He did not need to. In a room filled with people who were used to shouting to get their way, CEOs, socialites, and my stepmother, his quiet, terrifyingly precise legal baritone cut through the air like a scalpel. He stood next to the head table, his hand resting on the stack of documents he had removed from his briefcase. He looked at Vanessa, who was still trembling from the adrenaline of slapping me, and then he looked at the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan began, my name is Ethan Cole. I am the lead counsel for the Palladium Trust, and effective immediately, I am also the personal attorney for Ms. Violet Henry. Vanessa let out a strangled laugh. You represent her? With what money? She cannot even afford rent. Ms. Henry does not need to afford rent, Ethan said, ignoring her. Because as the primary beneficiary of the Palladium Trust, she is currently the wealthiest person in this room. He turned to Mr. Abernathy, my grandfather's old lawyer. Mr. Abernathy stepped forward, looking like an avenging angel in a tweed suit. He placed a heavy leather-bound binder on the table. "This," Mr. Abernathy announced, his voice gravelly with age but sharp with authority, "is the last will and testament of Walter Henry, updated and notarized 6 months ago. It supersedes the document Mrs. Vanessa Henry forced him to sign while under the influence of sedatives in 2021. "That is a lie!" Vanessa shrieked, grabbing Mark's arm again. "Mark, tell them! Walter was incompetent 6 months ago. He could not have signed anything." "We anticipated that objection," Ethan said calmly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black remote. He pointed it at the AV system console near the side of the stage. "Which is why we have prepared an exhibit regarding Mr. Henry's state of mind and the environment in which he has been living." He pressed a button. The speakers that had been playing soft jazz all night crackled. Then, a voice filled the room. It was unmistakably Vanessa's. "Sign it, Walter. Do not make me ask you again." The room went dead silent. Vanessa froze, her eyes widening until they looked like they might pop out of her head. I cannot see," Grandpa's voice replied on the recording, sounding weak and terrified. "You do not need to see," Vanessa's recorded voice snapped. "Just scribble your name, or do you want to miss dinner again? I can tell Helga to skip your tray. You know how hungry you get at night." A collective gasp ripped through the room. A woman at table 4 covered her mouth with her hand. My father, Mark, looked up at the ceiling speakers, his face draining of color. "That is doctored," Vanessa screamed, looking around wildly. "That is AI. That is fake." Ethan pressed the button again. Another clip played. "She is a leech, Mark. Once we sell the house and dump the old man in Arizona, we cut her loose. I do not care if she ends up on the street. She is just an obstacle to the money." The recording cut off. The silence that followed was heavy, judgmental, and absolute. "That was recorded 3 days ago in the kitchen of the Henry estate," Ethan said. "It establishes clear intent to defraud, intent to abandon a vulnerable adult, and conspiracy to misappropriate funds." "You have no proof that was me," Vanessa shouted, though her voice was shaking now. "You cannot use illegal recordings in court." "Actually," Sarah Jenkins spoke up from her seat near the front. She stood, flashing her badge from the Office of Adult Protective Services. "In cases of suspected elder abuse where the victim is in imminent danger, the evidentiary threshold is quite different, and I just witnessed you strike a family member who was attempting to protect a vulnerable adult. That slap alone gives me cause to open an immediate investigation and place Mr. Henry in emergency protective custody." "Protective custody?" Vanessa scoffed. "From whom? I am his caretaker." "From you," Sarah said coldly. Vanessa turned to the crowd, her hands shaking. "This is a setup. Can you not see? Violet hired these people. She is trying to steal my husband's inheritance." "Speaking of stealing," Ethan said, pulling a spreadsheet from his stack, "let's talk about the 3 shell companies in Nevada: VH Consulting, Desert Sky Management, and Blue Horizon Logistics." Vanessa went rigid. "Over the last 18 months, Ethan continued, reading from the paper, you have transferred a total of $450,000 from the Henry family operating accounts into these entities. Interestingly, none of these companies have employees, offices, or clients. Their only activity is receiving wire transfers from Pinebrook and sending wire transfers to a personal account in the Cayman Islands listed under your maiden name." The guests were whispering furiously now. The forensic accountant, the woman with the laptop case, stepped forward and plugged a cable into a projector I had not even noticed was set up. A graph appeared on the wall behind the head table. It showed the flow of money. It was a bright red line bleeding the estate dry, leading directly to Vanessa. That is for tax planning," Vanessa stammered, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Mark knows about it. Mark, tell them." She turned to my father. Mark was staring at the graph. He looked at the dates. He looked at the amounts. 400,000, Mark whispered. "You told me we were broke. You told me we had to sell the house because the medical bills were too high." "We are broke," Vanessa insisted. Because of the market. Mark, listen to me. We are broke because you bought a condo in Cabo San Lucas 2 months ago. Ethan corrected her, flipping a page. Paid for in cash. The deed is right here. Mark stared at her, for the first time in 7 years. The fog in his eyes seemed to lift, replaced by a horror so deep it looked physically painful. He had sold his soul to this woman, allowed her to abuse his father and discard his daughter, all because he thought she was saving the family, and she was robbing him blind. You lied to me, Mark said. His voice was quiet, broken. You said it was for us. It is for us, Vanessa hissed, grabbing his lapels. Mark, pull it together. They are trying to divide us. I think, a new voice cut through the chaos, that you have done a fine job of dividing us all on your own, Vanessa. It was the voice from the wheelchair. This time, Grandpa Walter did not just lift his head. He placed his hands on the armrests of his chair. His knuckles turned white, and slowly, agonizingly, but with a strength that defied medical logic, he pushed himself up. He stood. He was shaky, yes, but he was standing. Vanessa stumbled back as if she had seen a ghost. No, you cannot walk. The doctor said. The doctor you hired said what you paid him to say, Grandpa rasped. He looked at her, his blue eyes blazing with a clarity that was terrifying. I have been walking around my room every night for 6 months. I have been doing squats while you were out shopping with my money. He took a step toward her, then another. He looked at his son. Mark, Grandpa said sternly. Dad, Mark sobbed, tears streaming down his face. Dad, I did not know, I swear. You did not know because you did not look, Grandpa said, his voice hard. You let her put blinders on you. You let her treat your daughter like a servant. You let her treat me like a dog. You are a weak man, Mark, and today, you are going to learn the cost of that weakness. Grandpa turned to me. He smiled. A real, genuine smile. But Violet, he said, his voice softening. Violet looked. Violet listened. Violet is the only one who passed the test. Vanessa was backing away, looking for an exit. This is insane. I am leaving. I am calling my lawyer. You can call him, Ethan said pleasantly, but I doubt he will take the call once his retainer check bounces. What are you talking about? Vanessa snapped. The twist, I said. I stepped forward, standing next to Grandpa. I looked at Vanessa, who was now cornered near the buffet table. You picked this venue, didn't you, Vanessa? I asked. The Crestview Hall. You picked it because it is the most expensive, most exclusive place in town. You wanted to show off. So what? She spat. You should have checked the deed, I said. Ethan held up a document. The Crestview Hall is held by a holding company called Riverfront Properties. Until last week, that company was a subsidiary of Henry Logistics, but as of Tuesday, the ownership was transferred into the Palladium Trust. Vanessa blinked. I do not understand. It means, I said, pointing at the floor, that you are standing in my building. I own this hall. I own the kitchen. I own the chairs you are sitting on. You are trespassing. The guests gasped. A few people actually laughed. A nervous, shocked laughter. And as the owner, I continued, my voice steady, I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, especially thieves. You cannot kick me out of my own party, Vanessa screamed. It is not your party, I said. You paid the deposit with a credit card linked to the family operating account, the account that Ethan froze exactly 10 minutes ago. Ethan nodded to the judge standing in the back. The judge stepped forward, holding a piece of paper stamped with the official seal of the county court. Mrs. Henry, the judge said, his voice booming, I have signed an emergency ex parte order freezing all assets held jointly or individually by you and Mark Henry, pending a forensic audit. Your credit cards are dead. Your bank accounts are locked. Even that condo in Cabo has a lien on it as of 5 minutes ago. Vanessa reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone. She tapped frantically on her banking app. Her face went gray. She dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. 0, she whispered. It says 0. Actually, Ethan corrected, it is negative. We filed a clawback motion for the legal fees. Vanessa looked around the room. She looked at the guests who were now filming her downfall with glee. She looked at Mark, who was weeping into his hands. She looked at Grandpa, who was standing tall like an old oak tree that refused to fall. And she looked at me. You planned this, she hissed. You little witch, you planned this whole thing. I did, I said. You wanted to sell my home. You wanted to erase my mother's memory. You wanted to throw my grandfather away like garbage. Did you really think I was just going to let you? I walked over to the table where she had been sitting. I picked up her champagne glass. I poured the expensive liquid onto the floor, right over her shoes. Get out, I said. Mark, she screamed, turning to my father one last time. Do something. Throw her out. She is humiliating us. Mark Henry slowly lifted his head. He looked at his wife. He looked at the woman who had isolated him from his family, spent his fortune, and turned him into a coward. He stood up. He walked over to her. Vanessa smiled, thinking he was coming to her rescue. Mark reached out and took the car keys from her hand. Mark, she whispered. The car is in my name, Mark said, his voice hoarse. And the gas was paid for with company money. You are not taking it. How am I supposed to get home? She shrieked. Mark turned his back on her. He walked over to Grandpa and me. He stood there, head bowed, waiting for judgment. I do not care, Mark said to the room. I looked at the security guards, the ones Vanessa had hired to throw me out. Gentlemen, I said, pointing at my stepmother, please escort this woman off the premises and make sure she does not take any silverware with her. The guards hesitated for a second. Then, they looked at the judge, they looked at the police, and they looked at me, the woman wearing the Henry ring. They moved toward Vanessa. Do not touch me, she screamed, flailing as they grabbed her arms. I am Vanessa Henry. I am the lady of the house. You cannot do this. You are nothing, she yelled at me as they dragged her toward the doors. You will pay for this, Violet. You hear me? You will pay. I watched her go. I watched the woman who had tormented me for 7 years, the woman who had made me feel small and worthless, being hauled out of my building like an unruly drunk. The doors slammed shut behind her. The room was silent again, but this time, it was a clean silence. The air felt lighter. I looked at Grandpa. He was swaying slightly, his energy fading now that the adrenaline was wearing off. I grabbed his arm to steady him. You okay, Grandpa? I asked. He looked at me, his eyes twinkling. I have never been better, kid, he whispered. Did you see her face? I saw it. I smiled. I looked at the crowd. They were still standing, unsure of what to do. The bar is still open, I announced. And since I own the place, the drinks are on the house. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening. We have some family business to attend to. As the guests hesitantly began to talk again, the shock wearing off into excitement, I turned to my father. He was kneeling on the floor in front of Grandpa's wheelchair, sobbing like a child. I am sorry, he choked out. I am so sorry, Dad. Violet, I am so sorry. I looked down at him. Part of me wanted to comfort him. Part of me wanted to scream at him. But Grandpa spoke first. Get up, Mark, he said, his voice tired but firm. Mark stood up, wiping his face. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. We have a lot of work to do, Grandpa said, and you have a lot to answer for. But first, we are going home, to the house, my house. Yes, Mark whispered. Yes, Dad. I looked at the ring on my finger, the lion and the key. The war was over. Vanessa was gone, but the cleanup was just beginning. And as I looked at my broken father and my warrior grandfather, I knew that for the first time in a long time, the Henry family was actually in good hands. Mine. The heavy double doors of the Crestview Hall slammed shut, cutting off Vanessa's screaming. The silence that rushed back into the room was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of my father, Mark Henry, who was standing in the center of the room looking like a man who had just woken up in a burning house. I did not look at the doors where my stepmother had been dragged out. I looked at my father. For 7 years, I had waited for him to wake up. I had waited for him to see Vanessa for what she was. I had waited for him to defend me, standing there in my velvet dress, with the bruise on my cheek throbbing and the Henry family ring heavy on my finger. I realized I was done waiting. Mark slowly turned toward us. His face was a mask of devastation. The arrogance he had worn earlier in the evening, the confidence of a man who thought he was making hard choices for the family, was gone. In its place was a terrified confusion. He looked at Grandpa Walter, who was sitting tall in his wheelchair, breathing hard, but eyes clear as glass. Then he looked at me. He took a step forward, his hands trembling. "Dad," he whispered to Grandpa, I swear to you, I did not know about the accounts. I did not know she was threatening you." Grandpa Walter did not smile. He did not offer comfort. He looked at his son with a gaze that was ancient and incredibly sad. "You did not know because it was easier not to know," Grandpa said. His voice was raspy, worn down by years of silence, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You traded your spine for a quiet life, Mark. You let that woman walk into my house, move your wife's things, abuse your daughter, and lock your father away. And you signed the papers because you wanted to believe her lies more than you wanted to protect your blood." Mark flinched as if he had been slapped. "I loved her," he choked out. "You loved the illusion," Grandpa corrected him, "and you sacrificed us to keep it." Grandpa wheeled his chair forward a few inches, closing the distance between them. "So here is how it is going to be," Grandpa said. "Tonight, you lost your wife, but you are on the edge of losing a lot more. You are not the patriarch of this family. Mark, you never were. And as of tonight, you are not the executor of my estate, and you are not my power of attorney." Mark looked down at the floor, tears dripping off his chin. "I understand. I am giving you a choice," Grandpa continued, his voice hardening. "You can walk out those doors and go chase after Vanessa. You can try to salvage that toxic mess of a marriage. If you do that, you are cut off. Not a penny, not a phone call. You are dead to us." The room held its breath. "Or," Grandpa said, "you can stay. You can check yourself into a therapy program, one that I choose. You can spend the next year learning how to be a man again. You can earn your way back into this family. But you start at the bottom. You have no authority. You have no access to the money. You are just a son who has a lot to apologize for." Mark lifted his head. He looked at the closed doors where Vanessa had vanished. Then he looked at me. He saw the red mark on my cheek. He saw the way I was standing, not cowering, not hiding, but watching him with the cold assessment of a stranger. "I choose you," Mark whispered. "I choose the family." "Do not tell me," Grandpa said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Tell her." Mark turned to me fully. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time in a decade. He saw the 27-year-old woman who had built a career, who had uncovered a financial crime, and who had just saved his father's life, all while he was busy looking at his shoes. "Violet," he said, his voice cracking, "I am so sorry." He reached out a hand, but he did not touch me. He pulled it back, sensing the wall I had built around myself. "I let her hurt you," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush of shame. "I watched her treat you like a servant in your own home. I watched her hit you, tonight, and the other day. I saw it, and I did nothing." "Why?" I asked. It was the only question that mattered. "Why didn't you stop her, Dad?" "Because I was weak," he admitted, hanging his head. "Because I was afraid of being alone after your mom died. And then, I was afraid of admitting I had made a mistake, so I let her rewrite reality. I am so sorry. Violet, I failed you. I failed you completely." I looked at him. I saw the broken man in the tuxedo. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him that sorry did not fix 7 years of psychological torture, but another part of me, the part that remembered him teaching me to ride a bike before Vanessa, before the grief, saw that he was finally truly awake. "I accept your apology, Dad," I said quietly. He let out a sob of relief. "But," I added, my voice steel, "things are different now. I am not the girl who lives in the guest cottage anymore. I am not the one who cleans up the messes. If you want to be in my life, you respect me, you listen to me, and you never, ever let anyone raise a hand to me again." "Never," Mark vowed. "Never again." "Good," I said. I turned to the rest of the room. The guests were still watching, fascinated by the raw, unpolished drama unfolding in front of them. The judge, the police officers, and Ethan Cole were standing by, waiting for instructions. Ethan stepped forward. "We have the emergency guardianship papers ready. Violet, with the evidence we presented and the assault witnessed by the court officer, the judge is ready to sign temporary custody of Walter and the estate over to you immediately." I looked at Grandpa. "Is that what you want?" Grandpa nodded. "I told you, you are the keeper of the seal. You are the only one I trust." "Then let's do it," I said. I signed the papers right there on the white tablecloth of the Crestview Hall. Using a pen borrowed from the judge, with a few strokes of ink, the power dynamic of the Henry family shifted permanently. Vanessa was out, Mark was demoted, and I was in charge. "What about the living arrangements?" Ethan asked, capping his pen. "Vanessa listed the house for sale, but we can pull the listing tomorrow. We can kick her out and move you both back into the main estate." I looked at Grandpa. I thought about the big house in Pinebrook. I thought about the dark hallways, the furniture Vanessa had bought, the kitchen where she had threatened him, the backyard where she had slapped me. That house was a museum of bad memories. It was a place where ghosts walked. "No," Grandpa said, answering before I could. He looked at me with a twinkle in his eye. "I never liked those drapes she bought anyway, and the house is too big, too quiet." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a duplicate of the silver key he had given me. "I hear the views from the Pearl District are spectacular this time of year," he said, "and I happen to know a very nice loft with an extra bedroom and a kitchen fully stocked for baking." I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth spread through my chest for the first time that night. "Loft 3B?" "Loft 3B, he confirmed. "It is time for a fresh start. Violet, a real one." "Then it is settled," I announced to the room. "We are moving to Portland. The Pinebrook estate will be sold, and the proceeds will go back into the trust." I looked at the crowd of guests, my relatives, my father's business partners, the neighbors who had watched me get treated like dirt for years and said nothing. "Thank you all for coming," I said coldly. "You can go home now." They started to move, shuffling toward the exits, but a few of them, Aunt Linda, Mr. Henderson, and a few cousins, lingered. They walked up to the head table, looking sheepish. "Violet," Aunt Linda said, twisting her pearl necklace, We had no idea it was that bad. Vanessa. She told us you were difficult. We just thought—" "You thought it was easier to believe her than to ask me," I said. Linda flinched. "We are sorry. We should have stepped in." "Yes," I said. "You should have." I did not absolve them. I did not tell them it was okay. I let them sit with their discomfort. They needed to feel it. They apologized to Grandpa, who waved them off with a tired hand, and then they retreated into the night, leaving the three of us, and our legal team, alone in the empty hall. "Let's get out of here," Grandpa said. "I need fresh air, and I think I want a burger, a greasy one. Vanessa has had me on kale smoothies for 3 years. I laughed. It was a startled, happy sound. "A burger it is." We walked out of the Crestview Hall together. I pushed Grandpa's wheelchair, and Mark walked silently beside us, carrying the box of documents Ethan had compiled. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was crisp and smelled of wet pavement and pine. The city lights of Portland glowed in the distance, reflected in the puddles on the ground. Ethan and the team said their goodbyes, promising to handle the legal fallout with Vanessa in the morning. Mark went to get the car, my car, since Vanessa had been stripped of the keys. For a moment, it was just me and Grandpa waiting under the awning. I reached into my purse and pulled out the silver key to the loft. It glinted under the yellow security lights. It looked so small, just a piece of shaped metal, but it had unlocked everything. It had unlocked the truth, unlocked my courage, and unlocked my future. "You did good, kid," Grandpa said softly, looking at the key in my hand. "I was terrified," I admitted. "When I stood up, I thought my legs were going to give out." "But they didn't," he said. He reached up and patted my hand, the one wearing the ring. "You know, I built this company. I fought off hostile takeovers. I dealt with sharks and liars my whole life. But I do not think I ever had the guts to do what you did tonight." I looked down at him. "What do you mean? You gave me the evidence. You set it all up." "I set the stage," Walter said. "But you had to walk onto it. You had to stand in front of a room full of people who looked down on you and tell them they were wrong. You had to tear up that paper when you had nothing to lose. You faced her down. Violet, you did what I could not. I let her take over because I was old and tired. You took it back because you were strong." Tears pricked my eyes again, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release. "We are free, Grandpa," I whispered. "Yes," he said. "We are—" Mark pulled the car up to the curb. He got out and opened the door for us, moving with a humility I had never seen in him. He helped Grandpa transfer from the wheelchair to the passenger seat, with a gentleness that suggested he was finally trying to make amends. I got into the driver's seat. I put the key in the ignition. "Where to?" I asked. "Home," Grandpa said. "The new one?" I drove us away from the Crestview Hall, leaving the scene of Vanessa's destruction in the rearview mirror. We drove toward the city, toward the river, toward the loft with the high ceilings and the books and the safety. 2 days later, I went back to the Pinebrook estate one last time. I went alone. The house was silent. The staff had been dismissed. Vanessa had been allowed to return for 2 hours under police supervision to pack her personal clothes. Nothing of value, no jewelry, no art. The house felt hollow, stripped of the oppressive energy she had filled it with. I walked through the empty rooms. I walked past the kitchen island where she had plotted against us. I walked past the dining room where I had been made to serve appetizers. I walked into my old room in the guest cottage, which was already boxed up. I did not feel sad. I felt light. I walked to the front door. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the heavy door shut. It clicked with a finality that echoed in my bones. I locked the deadbolt. I walked down the driveway to where my car was waiting. In the passenger seat, a file folder sat, the signed deed to the riverfront loft, fully in my name. I looked back at the house one last time. It was just a building. It was just brick and mortar. Like Vanessa had said, my home was not there anymore. My home was with the people who respected me. My home was in the future I was about to build. I turned my back on the estate. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove toward the skyline, ready to start the first day of the rest of my life. I was Violet Henry, and nobody was ever going to beat me again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Do not forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that like button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.